Thank you, Mr. President. Will the sponsor yield for a couple questions?
Does the sponsor yield?
I will.
Sponsor yields.
Senator, this constitutional amendment is amending a constitutional amendment on independent redistricting commission that was approved and passed by the voters of New York State in 2014, correct?
Mostly correct. I should clarify that I believe the word independent, as it relates to this commission, is in dispute, as a judge refused to allow that word to appear on the ballot when it was voted on.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
The word independent, as it relates to the current commission, has been in dispute for the better part of a decade, and a judge ruled that that word could not be used when it was placed on the ballot. But overall, your statement is correct.
Through you, Mr. President.
Sponsor yield.
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
This amendment effectively eliminates the minority conferences of the legislature from participating in the redistricting process. The members of the commission, 2 appointed by each conference, so 8 in total, and then 2 appointed by the those commissioners that were chosen, would make the findings and submittals to the legislature on redistricting. And it would require, the 2014 amendment would require that any situation where there were not 7 members of that 10-member board in agreement on the plan to be submitted, that would be subject to a 2/3 vote by each legislative house, correct? And this amendment reduces that to 60%.
The important caveat you're leaving out is that rule would only apply in the circumstance where the Democratic Party is in charge of the Senate. Had the Republican Party been in charge of the Senate, an entirely different set of voting rules was established under the current system.
Through you, Mr. President.
Does the senator sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
This amendment applies to both, whether it's a Democrat majority or a Senate majority of both houses. If it were Republican majorities of both houses, then it would require a 2/3 vote of the legislature if 7 of those commission members didn't agree. Yes.
Okay, I'm trying to understand what the question is because you just made a statement, but I'll assume you ended that with, is that correct? You are laying bare, the senator is laying bare the malfeasance that took place in establishing this commission. The Assembly has been in supermajority status for decades. And for the then Republican majority of the Senate to say, if somehow the Assembly turns Republican too, which was never in the realm of possibility, then we'd also be subject to these rules. When in fact, on a practical basis, the clever wordsmithing of this existing proposal only applied because at the time the Senate makeup was in dispute. Now, it should put Senator O'Mara and others at ease to know that we have beaten them so badly over the last cycle that in fact we're on the verge of a supermajority ourselves, so this entire hypothetical may be moot. But we are just trying to establish that the same rules apply to everybody, regardless of which party is in control. And to establish in the Constitution different rules depending on partisan control is an outrage that we've been staring at in our Constitution for almost a decade, and we are fixing it starting today.
Mr. President.
Does the sponsor yield? Sponsor yields.
Wouldn't you agree, Senator, that the Independent Redistricting Commission was designed for bipartisanship and so that it wouldn't be controlled by just one party?
The commission was established for the rules that we live under. The commission is a part of that. were designed to protect the majorities at the time they were established.
Agree with that, Mr. President, but if the sponsor will yield for another question.
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
This amendment further changes some language that will allow the legislature to draw lines that divides towns. Is that correct?
No, the language in the Constitution as it relates to the division of towns is unchanged. The language in the Constitution as it relates to the division of towns is unchanged.
What?
Unchanged. Unchanged.
Unchanged.
From page 2, line 34 of the bill, this is the existing language of the Constitution. No town, except a town having more than a full ratio of apportionment, shall be divided in the formation of Senate districts. That's the existing language, and that's unchanged.
President,
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
maybe I need some further clarification, but I'm reading on page 4 of the bill, paragraph 6, lines 37, 38. Removes language, line 40, excuse me, deletes language that states the requirements that the Senate districts not divide counties or towns, as well as block on border and town on border rules. You're removing that language from the amendment. So how is it that you can say that you're not going to be able to divide towns or the other situations mentioned therein?
Language I just read to you that states very clearly that no town shall be divided in the forming of Senate districts.
Where was that again?
Page 2 of the bill, line 34.
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Are you stating, Senator, that it is not the intention of this amendment to allow for the division of towns? Through you, Mr. President.
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
This amendment further requires that inmates be counted from their home. How is that determined, Senator?
The rule about prison gerrymandering has been in place for over a decade in this state, and it was in place when the last reapportionment occurred. So the state is already knows how to do this. All we're doing is codifying it in the Constitution itself.
Through you, Mr. President.
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
What happens in a situation where an inmate may be incarcerated somewhere and their family relocates to be closer to that prison so they can visit more often, and then the inmate is released and stays in that locale?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, Senator. If the inmate's family relocates to the community in which the prison is, why would that inmate's home not be considered in that community?
Well, as I mentioned, the rule on how that is determined is already in place. We're not changing that. And the rule requires that the incarcerated individual be recognized at their place of previous domicile before they were incarcerated. There's no guarantee that that person would choose to live with their family if the family moved. The rule in New York, as it has been for over 10 years, is that that person is counted where they previously resided.
The sponsor will yield.
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
What happens in the situation of an inmate that is from out of state?
If they counted as living here, they would be out-of-state residents.
Through you, Mr. President, sponsor will yield.
Does the Senate sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
There are many instances in this amendment where it is stricken that aliens shall be excluded from the numbers being used for reapportionment. What is the intention of that?
Just to clarify already existing practice due to constitutional decisions at the federal level. The undocumented have been, and the documented immigrants have been counted for census purposes for many, many years. So that's more of a cleanup of existing practice because we have anachronistic language in the Constitution.
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
I would disagree with that interpretation that, yes, aliens and illegal aliens and undocumented have been counted for census purposes, but those numbers have not been utilized for apportionment of districts.
The residents.
Excuse me, through you, Mr. President.
Does the sponsor yield?
They're saying in,
Well, hold on. Does the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
so you're saying in prior reapportionments, this state has utilized the numbers of aliens, illegal aliens, undocumented in reapportioning districts. Through you, Mr. President.
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Just last week, we had a hearing on the Independent Redistricting Commission that you chaired, Senator, and there was major concerns raised by the interested parties testifying at that hearing of the tight time frame in being able to turn around maps from the Independent Redistricting Commission